Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives. I'm King, and I'm joined with my co-host Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Good to be with you here on Wednesday morning, as always. Um, Looking forward to our conversation.
So am I. So am I. As I had to stumble through that. So, what's your spiritual energy number?
Coming in with a 10 out of 10. Again, recent weeks, I'm choosing that since I am navigating some annoying and inconvenient things, but in the overall scheme of the, the planet and our existence, I have nothing to complain about.
Well, I join you. I'm a 10 as well. I'm living with gratitude, and I'll share my gratitude list. What I'm grateful for: life, health, ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. Grateful another 24 hours to be alive. Grateful roof over my head, food to eat, and just this journey that I'm on and what I'm learning, what I'm discovering. Just grateful to be alive and be aware and woke enough, conscious to understand what life really means now at this stage. So I'm grateful for that. That's my gratitude. What about yourself? What would be
Yeah,
your gratitude list?
yeah. So I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for my standard gratitude every morning is I'm grateful for indoor plumbing, heat in the winter, a fan or occasionally air conditioning in the summertime, food in a refrigerator, fresh food for the most part, um, relatively functional physical body and mind as far as I can tell. Some good friends, work that serves my soul and I think serves the world as well. Um, and just some of the basic freedoms that uh, I'm able to get up every morning, eat food, do work, love people, without anybody telling me I can't do that. And I'm especially grateful for those last things because of my acute awareness of how some of those can be taken away and how billions of people on the planet don't have them. So I'm just grateful for my own coincidence of good fortune.
Okay, it's powerful. I feel you on that. Gratitude for sharing. So with that being said, let's get on with today's show. What's today's topic?
Yeah, so we want to talk about the idea, the concept, and the behavior of non-cooperation, of just not going along with things that feel off or feel wrong or that are blatantly dangerous, wrong, illegal, etc. And I came to this. I'm going to just briefly share the screen here for a moment, if I can get the file up. Um, I came to this in order to, or rather because, um, I've been really studying and taking a close look at what happens in other countries and what has happened and what has worked in other countries when democracy has been threatened or when people um, have not had a democracy but were basically willing to fight to get one. And I'm not going to be able to come up with the file, so I had it ready here, but it's just not happening. So let me just ignore that for a few minutes and get back to where we belong here. Um, so I'll just mention a couple things. So in a wonderful book uh, by a gentleman by the name of Gene Sharp, the title of the book is From Dictatorship to Democracy. And he wrote it at the request of some of his friends in Burma, in Southeast Asia, in the 1990s. And he put together some tools and some strategies and what to do if you're in a dictatorship and you're fighting to build a democracy. And he put it out in a serial format, and that's SER, not CER. So it wasn't something people were supposed to eat; they're supposed to read it. But a periodical format, and it began to make its way around the world. This is 1993, 1994. And now it's available in a published book. It's a small volume, again entitled From Dictatorship to Democracy. And one of the strategies or tools that he talks about is the idea of non-cooperation. Right? More recently, in Timothy Snyder's book on freedom, on tyranny, Snyder has a book on freedom too, but that's not the one we want right now. 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. His first of 20 lessons is do not obey in advance. So that's another way to say non-cooperation. And I just want to give a couple of quick examples about why that's important, even though for most people who might listen to this, it might be very obvious, but I want to provide the examples anyway, starting with the present, working back to the past. So the folks just as examples, folks in Chicago, especially in Minneapolis, folks in Los Angeles, folks in Portland, and folks in a variety of other cities around the nation didn't obey the Homeland Security, ICE agents, and Border Patrol agents in advance. In fact, they didn't obey them for the most part at all. And they protested against them. They warned people that they were coming using whistles and garbage can covers and air horns and different things. So they practiced that in order to minimize the damage that these barely trained ICE agents and overzealous Border Patrol agents could do in their cities. That's one example. The counterexample is what the owners, let's say, of the Washington Post, Jeff Bezos, the owner of the Los Angeles Times, whose name I forget, who's a brilliant scientist, who has done good work in the world, but he bought the Times and he began to censor it. What the partners in some major, really large law firms, what Columbia University and some other major universities did was they began to obey restrictions on themselves from the Trump administration in advance in order to stay in good graces with the president. So they didn't practice non-cooperation. The New York Times did practice non-cooperation. Harvard University practiced non-cooperation. So we're seeing examples currently in these major institutions and with local people on the ground, some of whom cooperate with the government when they're violating the First Amendment for the most part, trying to control the press, trying to control speech, trying to control assembly. And then we're seeing examples where people don't cooperate. Now, if we move back and we just go, an easy place to see this is back during the Civil Rights Movement, when not only did the civil rights workers not cooperate with the former Confederate states, local and state governments. If I were black, if you were down there and you were at the time, you could not have eaten in certain places. You could not have gotten on certain buses. You would have had to sit in the back of certain buses. You couldn't assemble in certain places, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The civil rights workers didn't cooperate with any of that. In fact, they deliberately violated those laws that restricted their freedoms, even though they were American citizens. And we go on and on. There are countless examples. It's becoming increasingly, this is the last thing I'll say, it's becoming increasingly important as we see this administration and its overly cooperative Republican Congress, who lets it do whatever it wants to do, just really trample on the democratic norms with all of their shortcomings. And you and I have spoken a great deal about the shortcomings over the last 3 years. But we're aware that progress has been made and continues to be made. It's really essential that ordinary people and large institutions, again, New York Times, Harvard University are two examples of institutions that did not cooperate in advance and have refused to cooperate. It's more and more important that we don't cooperate in advance. And that's scary for a lot of us, as it should be, because we've seen American citizens killed. We've seen documented immigrants killed. We've seen undocumented immigrants die in detention centers. I think the number's up to 12 now. That people have died in ICE detention centers in this country in the last 18 months or so. Excuse me, in the last, just about 18 months, maybe a little bit less. So this idea of non-cooperation with a regime that has no regard for the rule of law is essential, because the politicians who want to be reelected are impacted by what the people do. Not as impacted as I would like them to be, but it's very, very clear that anybody going along with the current administration and who wants to be elected in this country, more and more people in both red and blue states aren't having it. They don't want the war in Iran. They don't want the tariffs. They don't want the oil embargo that's killing people in Cuba now. They don't want the interventions in Venezuela and Cuba and Iran that this president of peace is orchestrating. And they want our money to be spent here at home, not bombing other people. So anyway, that's a long way to talk about non-cooperation and not obeying in advance.
All right. Well, interesting topic you chosen, because I look at that and receive. So first of all, we're in alignment with what you laid out. Absolutely, I agree that it should be in non-compliance with this administration in particular. But I think the reality also has to be shared that it still has a different weight on the people depending on where they are in the social hierarchy in the American system. So again, pretty much minorities, we've only had about, at best, 8 years, Obama twice, Biden, best 16 years of government being somewhat in alignment with not being cruel. Now we've been asked, go back to when the government was your enemy again and now it being non-compliance. So we only had 16 years of what that looked like. So that's the weight of not even having really a full generation used to the government being a friend as opposed to a foe and enacting laws and policy that are going to be counterintuitive and against you just because of your color of your skin. There's nothing you can do to change that other than not comply, of course. And then that's, again, becomes the norm instead of the exception. So I just want to make that statement as well, because it comes down to just making sure that everybody understands at the end of the day that who you bring into your world and who you allow yourself to be around is going to affect you and bring different energy around you that's going to make your life miserable. And if you add that to what this current administration is doing to the world is horrific. But like I said, for other folks who've never really had a full experience of what it feels like not to have an oppressive regime that you're not in alignment with, making decisions that are not in your best interest or your immediate needs, you get used to that. That becomes what you don't really expect the government to really truly have your back fully. Trump has just brought a whole different element in it. See, my question is what must he continue to do before folks really say we're going to enact and really push J.D. Vance to make a move? So it's like, for there still to be such a small minority of people that surround and still give Trump his base, he seems to still appear that he's really truly Teflon Don. Nothing seems to stick to him. And it's like, what must he do in order to make it stick? And he literally launch nukes, hit the nuclear button. If he just goes into a room and just press a button, would that be the final straw before everybody says, well, we really got to get him out of office and damn the law, but we got to stop this man because he's a madman. I mean, he named the Department of Defense to the Department of War. I mean, just think about that. He's really displaying in full sight. This is what I'm doing. There's no subtlety to his approach. And the more he seems to get cornered, the more he seems to have time where there might be a democratic way of dealing with him, like the November elections. He seems to be trying to influence those, and everybody's talking about that. That seems to just be accepted. That he's trying to influence the November elections. It's like, but yet still, he's still in power. They talk about it. It's discussed on live TV, more all over the internet, and still nothing is done. And everybody's saying this is what's going to bring Trump down. And I've heard that, from the whole first term. Now we're hearing it again. So when people say that, that's literally like saying, the boy who cried wolf. And eventually that just says, oh, I don't believe that anymore. Because I don't think people are uncomfortable enough to make a difference. And that's what it's going to take. I think more people right now are still comfortable because we still, like I said, we're still watching, still planning for the World Series, the Super Bowl, or the NBA championships right now. Super Bowl's already played, NBA championships. Life is still going on. So as long as they say that when using that metaphor of the frogs in the warm water, as long as it's on simmer, and for most people who's financially more well off, it's on simmer right now. They're not feeling the pain. But you poor and you minority, you've been feeling this way your whole existence. It's been nothing but this. So that's why they're not as angry in mass over that. And not to mention there's no, again, unified, agreed upon what change would look like. So that's my first take.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with the idea of one of the great, this is ironic, I'll say it this way because it is kind of paradoxical, but one of the flaws, it's not a flaw, one of the realities that we face right now is that a majority of Americans across racial divides are comfortable. Right, there is poverty and there is hunger in the United States, but the vast majority of people who live in this country are comfortable. And, there are some millions, I forget the numbers, I think it's around 20 something million, who have some food insecurity and who are just living, month to month, day to day. But the vast majority of us, black, white, gay, straight, brown, Asian, etc., are comfortable. You and I are comfortable. And if you look at, because as slow as the progress has been, the subjugations and the crimes in this country took place, ironically, within a democracy. And the democracy worked. It took way too long. And it continues to sputter along. If we look as an example, as a contrast, you look at the people in Iran who for decades, now the people, not the power, the people in Iran who for decades have been living under an oppressive, theocratic regime. And when they go out into the street to protest, it's not like we wonder, if somebody gets arrested and kicked around and, maybe once in a while somebody gets killed. Tens of thousands of people got killed in the streets earlier this year in Iran, protesting against the regime. So they have a whole different take because they've been living under something that's nothing like freedom. They don't know what democracy feels like to live it. And the majority of anybody listening to this podcast, I know we don't have a big following, but anybody who might listen to this was born into one of the earliest democracies on the planet, arguably the first one. It's by no means the best one anymore. It's nowhere near as powerful of a democracy as some of the European nations, especially the Scandinavian nations. But it's not as up to date as Australia is, as Finland is, as Norway is, and some others, because the government really represents all the people. And some of those countries, in fairness, are easier to do that because they're very homogeneous. America does have a vast diversity. I mean, I grew up in New York, and you take the subway, and the United Nations is on the subway. There are hundreds of nationalities, every day in Manhattan. Um, so it's harder to do it that way because of racism, and because the power structure, as you've said, and as I agree, the power structure in this nation is, in fact, a white supremacist power structure. Again, not to say that everybody is a white supremacist, but the structure itself was built on that model back when the framers of the Constitution put the laws in place. So that's one. So I agree that we are too comfortable, and things have to get really bad for people to take to the streets. And that's why God bless the running joke is, God bless the middle-aged white women in Minneapolis, because that's who a lot, not that there weren't other people there, but a significant number of them were these middle-aged 50, 60 something year old women blowing their whistles and yelling at ICE. Again, not to minimize anybody else who was there. So that's the one point. The second thing is this: it's not like nobody's doing anything. Since the first Trump administration, and I'm going to mention 3 organizations. There are many more. I just don't know all of them. The one that I know best is the Brennan Center for Justice. It works out of New York University. There's the Democracy Docket, run by an attorney named Mark Elias. There's the decades old, I don't know if they're a century old or not, American Civil Liberties Union. All of these organizations have been doing 2 things: bringing lawsuits against the Trump administration and winning the majority of those that they bring. And they're relentless with this. And they're already prepping the most dangerous, they're getting the lawyers ready for the parts of the country that are going to be in the most danger of voting manipulation, especially in the swing states. So these people that are preparing for election day, they've been preparing for some years because they know what's at stake here. So they don't get covered by the media. And there are others besides the ones I mentioned. Even the American Bar Association, I don't know exactly what their role is, but they believe, it sounds stupid to say this, but they believe in the rule of law. All right. We can joke about lawyers and different things sometimes because we don't like some of the things that they do. But again, I would point to the people like Jack Smith. To people who were federal prosecutors who were fired by Donald Trump's, by Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and others in the Trump administration. And then those who resigned because they wouldn't do the things they were being ordered to do because it was against the law, basically. So there are a lot of good people doing a lot of good things, not just the lawyers. So, I'm pushing back just a little bit against, nobody's doing anything. The kind of nationwide networks of, was it 5051 and Indivisible? I'm going to do a virtual, they invited me out to California to do participate in a breakout group in Napa Valley, California for Rock the Congress, where they're training activists in April. And so there are a lot of people doing things. It's in many ways, it feels like a Sisyphean task, trying to push the boulder back up the hill. But it's not like nobody's doing anything. Not enough people, because they're comfortable right now, are doing enough. I would agree with that. But I want to tip my cap to the people who are really doing a lot of work and have been since 2016. And last thing I'll say, in those books I mentioned, especially in Gene Sharp's From Dictatorship to Democracy, it appears in Anne Applebaum's Autocracy, Inc. It appears in Levitsky and LeBlat's How Democracies Die. Anytime that democracy was able to push back against an encroaching autocrat or dictatorship. It occurred because people who believed in the rule of law and were willing to act on that, and people who really believed in democracy, but who considered themselves political opponents, like corporate leadership and union leadership, and many others. They all got together to preserve democracy and fight back against the autocrats. Right? That's essential. These coalitions of strange bedfellows, those who would normally be seen as opponents, their coming together has been present every time a democracy was lost and made its way back, or democracy fought off an autocrat and managed to hold on and survive. With no exceptions, those types of coalitions are necessary. And they're happening here in small ways. But that's not sensational because we have to listen to news stories about Jeffrey Epstein, the bombing of Iran, killing people in alleged narco terrorists in longboats, and the most recent stupid thing that Pam Bondi, Pete Hegseth, or Donald Trump says. That's what gets covered. So there are a lot of good people doing a lot of good work.
Well, let's be clear. You're not in alignment there. I don't believe I said that there is nobody doing anything about it. If I did say that, that's not the context I meant. So I want to be clear that, yeah, there are a lot of great people doing a lot of great work, and I take my hats off to the folks who are out there in the streets, coming out there, making sacrifices, all that. I tip my hat to them as well. Give them much love, much respect. I'm saying that the distinction I'm saying now is that the people who are normally being oppressed, there's no urgency to get out there and deal with it right now, as it's the folks who are out there doing that. That's what I'm saying. So I'm not saying that there's not anyone doing it. I'm saying that there's not enough people being impacted enough that the masses are not. It's not a mass movement. It's definitely some energy on the streets and energy and some politics and everything. There's definitely fighting against it for sure. But those folks are not galvanizing enough people behind them, because the folks who are used to the pain, there's no urgency to, and the leaders that are out there trying to galvanize the people are not effective enough to generate that interest. Obama had the ability to do it, but now Obama's energy is gone. He can't do it now. But so it has to be someone else who's going to have to galvanize the people. And that's a sad thing. People are too disconnected now. People are not talking about it enough. I mean, I believe it may be very urgent in your world, but I can tell you that in other circles that I talk to, that's not the dominant thought as far as the war in Iran, what he's doing to ICE agents, all those things are just not the conversation. Everybody else has their other issues inside of just living life, period, to deal with on top of that. That's their most immediate thought. Then on top of that, yeah, if I get a chance to breathe for a moment, yeah, I don't like the war in Iran. That's wrong. It's what he's doing. And, they give you an opinion on it, but there's no activity toward a particular cause. There's no, and as a result, here's what I'm doing. I'm involved with this activity. There's no conversation around that. So that's what I mean. So I'm not saying no one's not doing anything. I just want to make sure that, again, that distinction is there. I'm saying that there's no connected alignment to bring the masses together to overturn that. So definitely his administration is in a minority as far as the way they want to enact their laws, because if it wasn't, people will not push back at all. So we're seeing the pushback. It's just that it's not in an urgent situation, because at the same time, because you look at what is democracy? Democracy, if you define it instead of just leaving it broad like that, looking at the three branches of government, or any one of those branches working in your best interest. The answer is no, then you have no democracy. They all three of them are definitely against you, where you know you're not going to get justice. You know you're not going to get a government that's really going to act fair and just in your favor. You just have to accept what you can get and just, again, capitulate So non-compliance is the norm. It's the default setting, so to speak, the default mindset. It's just how the non-compliance gets enacted right now. There's going to be different energy around it. That's the only point I'm making. And the urgency is not there for united people to just get out in the streets because they're comfortable. And this is not turned up enough. Now, maybe November may be the breaking point. Maybe if he does impact the elections, which I believe he will, I believe that's the true plan is to put us in war and say, well, now because we're at war and we have to suspend the election so I can focus on the war effort. I believe that's the strategy. I hope I'm wrong, but I believe that's what he's going to do. So for me, that's what I'm looking for. What is this country going to do to prevent that from happening? Because if that happens, then there is no democracy for anybody. Everybody loses. I agree. And that's a horrible, horrible place to be. But that's where we will be if he's able to impact and influence and or just delay those elections to the point where even a minute, a day, if he has that power and he's able to flex it, what that's going to send to the world, what's it's going to send to everyone, and that's where America is going to be. To me, that's going to be the tipping point, so to speak. And either and it can't be, well, we got to get him out through the political process, impeachment. No, or we're going to remove him, period, and deal with all the laws and all that later. Because we've done that in the past. I mean, it's definitely been after the Reconstruction period. There were black elected officials that were just totally run out by the mob out of the congressional seats in the South by force, by mob violence, threw them out. So we know America has that in its operating system. So that could be enacted. It's just a matter of when. When is it going to get to the point where enough is enough?
Yeah, that's the question is what would bring about that sense of urgency in enough people? Because if part of what we're faced is the damage that's been done. I mean, there was damage done in from 2016 to 2020. There was a violent insurrection to overturn an election, and then those people got pardoned, and America kind of blinked. Okay, nothing we can do about it. Now, I mean, since January 20th, 2025, the number of government agencies and norms that have allowed this government to function for almost 250 years. Some are more recent, not all 250 years old, have just been dismantled because a small group of white Christian men who wrote Project 2025 wanted that, and they hired Donald Trump to do it. That didn't get a lot of attention. And again, I agree with you, because the vast majority of Americans are comfortable and not directly impacted by these changes yet. But gradually, we're going to see what's happened with the CDC. The country. And part of what we're facing is the overwhelm. It's not like, okay, we're against the war in Iran, or we're against the war in the tariffs. There are hundreds of things to oppose, and they keep coming every day. And the news media can't cover all of them. Even the best media, the real journalists, there aren't enough journalists to keep all of this in front of the American people, many of whom would rather scroll and look at TikTok and Instagram and just distract themselves, because they can find more comfort here. So, what will it take? And that's really, the question that we're asking. What would bring a sense of urgency? Would it be a complete falling apart of an already dysfunctional for-profit healthcare system, because we now have non-scientists leading it, people who don't believe in science, are leading the healthcare system in the United States? Would it be just ongoing wars and military actions? Would it be a failure to do what Joe Biden managed to get passed when he was president, the National Infrastructure Act, which gave people, which employed, I don't know if it's hundreds, but tens of thousands of people, and provided states with money to work on their corrupt bridges and tunnels and roadways? Will it be the infrastructure continuing to disintegrate? I mean, what will it take? And again, to come back to where you and I agree, as a nation, there are enough of us who, I don't like the language of middle class, lower class, upper class, but enough of us have their basic needs met. Whether we're renting or buying, we have a roof over our heads. We have a refrigerator with some food in it. There's a local market we can get more food. We have a gas-powered chariot that we can turn the key and drive around where we need to go, or we live in a city that has public transportation. We can go to work, get home, and we have, depending on where we live, adequate schools. Some places have great schools, some people have adequate schools. But basically, our needs are met. And we don't see what's dying because we're just comfortable. We have big screen TVs. We have plenty of entertainment. And as you said, getting ready for, the NCAA. The current one is the NHL and the NBA and the NCAA, and then baseball is going to start again, and then football will come again. And now you can bet on it. So people are spending their money on, wondering who's going to win this or score that or do that. So it's a nation of distraction. So it's overwhelming. Like all of the answers to the questions you and I are raising, I believe, are difficult because what's going on is so overwhelming, and our attention isn't really on the important things. I'd like to think at some level you and I have conversations, within whatever limitations you and I have intellectually and emotionally and in a knowledge-based way, but we're having, conversations about things that matter. We joke occasionally, like, I will watch some games in the NCAA tournament, but I don't sit in front of a TV all day. Like that's a treat for me. I mean, that's like my little 2.5 hour vacation, watching a basketball game. But it's a dangerous time for this country, and a lot of people are scared. And because the scope and scale of what's happening is broad and deep, it's hard to know what to do. Like, how can my voice matter? What difference does it make if I show up on March 28th, which is the next nationwide indivisible protest date? If I'm there or not, so what? There's going to be other people there. But that's how democracy works. And this is the last thing I wanted to say. We always come back to, and I do the same thing, and it's important to talk about the November elections. And that's a problem with how people look at our democracy. People think that, first of all, we never get anything close to 100% of registered voters to vote. We celebrate in America when we get over 60% of registered voters to vote. That's embarrassing. We should be ashamed of that. But voting is the every 2 years for the House of Representatives, every 6 years for the senators, and every 4 years for the president. That's entry level democracy. That's an important right and should be exercised. But if you're only doing democracy on election day, you're missing the point. And I'm not, not everybody's going to run for office, but you can meet locally, you can write about it, you can talk to people, you can teach it, you can write it. I already said write about it. You can do podcasts, you can, be more active in your local community, whatever it happens to be. That's how democracy works. Democracy is a practice. It's a system of government. Yeah, we have a democratic republic. We have a unique one, no longer the most effective one. Freedom House has us ranked. That's an international organization that ranks threats to democracy. And we're like somewhere in the 20s in terms of either high teens or low 20s in terms of effective democracies nationwide. We have a score that's like around 84 out of 100. Finland has a perfect score, 100. And it's corrupt. There's too much money in it. the Constitution itself needs amending, and it's almost impossible to amend now because of the polarization. The Electoral College and the Senate are disproportionate. They need to be changed. I live in a small state. I have 2 senators. I have the same number of senators as California, which has about 6 times more people than Connecticut. I want the representatives in Washington, D.C. to represent the number of people in the state. So the Senate has got to be revamped. The Electoral College is a joke. The Electoral College, 90% of the people in the 1970s wanted to get rid of the Electoral College. 300 something congressional representatives voted in favor of getting rid of an amendment to get rid of the Electoral College. Leadership in both the Senate and the House wanted to get rid of it, and every president, I think it was Nixon at the time, and Ford agreed, and I don't want to say too much, I forget all of the numbers. And like I said, 90% of the people were in favor of it. And in order to get the amendment passed, you got to get 2/3 of the House, which they did. And they couldn't get 2/3 of the Senate because the former Confederate states, those who benefited from the Electoral College, said, we've lost most of our rights that we had before the Civil War. This is in the 1970s. We won't pass that amendment. We could have gotten rid of the Electoral College 50 years ago, and the Senate kept it from happening. So, there's so many. If we didn't have an Electoral College, Hillary Clinton won the 2016 election. Joe Biden won the 2020 election, and there's a good chance Donald Trump wouldn't have been running anymore. I mean, who knows? Still might have run. But there are major flaws that have to be corrected, and the vast majority of Americans aren't aware of them. They don't know what to say to their congressmen and their senators. So the problems are really broad and deep, and it's overwhelming. So what do people do? And as you said, it doesn't feel urgent because it's overwhelming. What can I really do? My heat works in the winter. I have a roof over my head. The local market is pretty good. Gas prices are going up. That sucks, but I'll get through it. So we're too comfortable.
Yeah.
This is a depressing podcast for King. Shit.
Well, and that's what I want to flip it and say this. That's the thing about having a freedom of choice. You can choose to let that be your reality and focus your energy there, and that's going to be a drainage, and that's going to have an impact in your life in all kind of ways. Or you can choose to have a reality of being generative and connecting with people who live like that, and that's why I advocate the importance of connecting with intent, building relationships with people who you have things in alignment with in these times, because if not, then everything we just discussed, this world so far that's the reality. And as I said before, I'm not so much concerned about whether elections are going to be fair in November. I'm saying that Trump is talking about his goal is to make sure there's no elections at all, that he ceases elections. And that's what I believe will be the breaking point. I think that's what's going to be the thing that snaps the country, because at that point, all the other democracy things you laid out, you articulated, are great if people understood politics and government and democracy to that extent that you outlined. And most people don't. It's designed for them not to. So once you know that in high school, you never talk about it ever again unless you stay in politics or running for the government or involved in some form of education. But if you're not in those spaces, then that is not even a conversation that most people are interested in. I realized that because living in Washington, D.C., that's all people talk about. It's a political city. So that's a dominant conversation around everything. Every elected official is important. Every congressional person, multiple people, heads of certain committees and what the committee is for, because that's the culture of that town. And when I go to St. Louis, it's a whole complete opposite. Who are elected officials? I have no idea. They can care less, because to them, those elected officials are not doing anything for them directly. There's some need in knowing them, and if they do vote, They give you a down the ballot suggestions on all the ideas of who you should vote for if you choose Democrat. And it's all down ballot, so you ain't got to think about it. Just vote for all these people on the left side of this ballot. So that's the guidance they're getting, and that's their understanding of politics as it relates to voting at that level. Then what the world is experiencing right now is no different than what they've always had to deal with. It's no different. It's impacting and affecting more people. And Trump's indiscriminately with his assholeness that everybody can see he's an asshole. And just how much are they going to allow and tolerate that to happen? And I'm saying November is going to be that time. But I wanted to go back and talk about the folks who are fighting. I wanted to readdress that a little more and lean more into that. So I look at them as freedom fighters. And I admire the folks who are standing out in Minnesota. Anybody who's putting their life on the line right now, that's what that's really about. The people who are willing to stand up in his administration right now are some of the most bravest people I've ever seen, and I admire them because that has true consequences. And they're saying that I'm willing to bring all that on to be that much integrity because I believe in democracy that much, and I'm willing to be a martyr for that. And whatever happens, happens. And if they're not connected, they're not famous, it's going to be some things that's going to happen. They're going to experience some pain, and they understand that. So there has to be more recognition, more celebration, honor of those individuals, so that would incentivize more people to follow those behaviors. And that's what will help start bring change as well. But that's still only talked about on certain circles. Most people are just getting through their day and have to choose what decisions. How do I navigate paying for my groceries? How do I focus on my job because my wife just got fired or laid off from the other man for 30 years? How am I dealing with these health crises? I'm in my 50s, 60s, 70s. People around me are dying. They're dealing with that normality of life. And like I said, now you mix all this in there, it just becomes too much to deal with. So you have to begin to build connections and relationships with other people that can get you from ways of how to deal with this in your life, and to the point where that's not the most dominant thing you accept it. Because again, it's like once you begin to let one negative, it's like if you have a house that's closed and from some light getting in, with one beam gets in, two beams, and eventually you have no more privacy yet, with all the lights are shining on you, and you're dealing with the fact that you've been fully exposed. And that's what people are feeling, that weight of uncertainty is infecting more people. It's just not affecting the right people enough to bring them out the streets.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that you said. Now I'm gonna try one more time to share the screen here. And for some reason, I'm going to try this one more way, and then I'm going to give up. Okay, I know how to get it now. So I have this photograph ready to show, and for whatever reason, it's just not letting me do it the way I would normally do it. But I figured it out. So I appreciate your indulgence. So that's up there now, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So to just really quickly, because it's tied in with what you were just saying, and what we've been saying. So these are the 20 lessons from Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, and the first one up there is "Do not obey in advance," and then all 20 of them are important, but the last one. And he really bookmarked these, or bookended them, I should say, thoughtfully. The last one is be as courageous as you can. So in other words, not everybody is going to have the capacity or the ability or the life situation to be as courageous as everybody else. So there's different levels of courage, and you just need to be as courageous as you can. Some of these are very, very practical, specific things. Some of them are more general, like do not obey in advance. So I just wanted to share that screen for anybody that's not heard of Timothy Snyder or this particular book. It's available in a tiny little booklet, like a 3x5 booklet. And then he has a graphic edition that's just beautiful and has a little bit more to it. But both of them present in some detail some commentary on all of these 20 lessons. And these were all lessons learned from what happened in Europe in World War I and World War II, with communism, Nazism, and the horrible loss of life there. So I just wanted to put that up there because I had threatened to do it earlier and couldn't get it done exactly right. So I'll take that down. Any comment or question before I take it?
Don't take it down. I actually like it. I'm reading through the list, and I would say I like 18 of them for sure. 2 of them I have to guess and look up. I should say look up and get more information on before I can say I agree or I disagree. 13, I don't know what corporeal politics are.
I can say that really quickly. It just means beyond joining things online and sending out what you think on social media, get out in the street, use your body. So it doesn't mean like protest against ICE necessarily, but you can stand in front of City Hall with a sign. All right, that's corporeal politics. Corporeal meaning of the body. Right, so that's all that means.
And number 4, I don't think that you take responsibility for the face of the world. I think that's the same level as the song Beatles, John Lennon made called Imagine. It's in that same pretext. It's nice intent. That's not something you can practice. Everything else is things you can actually practice and implement, but that's idealistic. And
so I'll give you an example of how take responsibility for the face of the world can be very practical. If you walk down the street and on the side of a building, you see a Nazi sign spray painted on there. You can just keep walking. You can call the police. You can find the owner of the building, or you can get a canister. You can go out and get some paint, find paint that matches how the building did look, and paint over it yourself. That's what he's really specific, because he develops each of these in the book. So I agree with you. I'm not responsible for the whole planet. I can't. But the face of the world, you see that Nazi sign, or you see, whatever it is, some offensive language, you can walk past it or you can do something about it. That's what he means by that. So it can be idealistic, but it can be very practical.
And that's why I'm saying, to your point, that he's very specific. And that's why I have the issue with it. Because, I look at that, and that's the same scenario you said, and I'll look at believe in truth, we'll deal with that. If I believe in truth, then I'm going to deal with the Nazi symbol. Be as courageous as I can, it will have me deal with the Nazi symbol. I'm going to be a patriot, will help me deal with it. Contribute to good causes would help me deal with it. So there's so many other ways I would deal with it, other reasons that I support in dealing with it, other than take responsibility for the face of the world. See, for me, I interpret that with a different type of anxiety and weight, because, like, for example, how can I be the face of America right now if I wanted to be? So if I take responsibility for that, how can I take responsibility for being the face of America if I went outside this country and try to be what I thought America was? What would that look like? How would I represent that to be the face of that? I think that would be too difficult. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and so and that's why that's the importance of the book itself, because what you're talking about, what would be too difficult, that's not what he means by that. And so you need to not just take the chapter title, which is Take Responsibility for the Face of the World, but see his articulation of what he means by every one of these. The only one that's not explained in detail is be as courageous as you can. Like, he doesn't give you any commentary on that. But the other 20, he provides examples, tells you what he means. By no means is he saying that any one of us is responsible for the whole country or the whole planet. The face of the world, of the world, as I'm walking down the street, I can give examples of where I've seen injustice taking place and stepped in to try to stop it. That's what he means. But it's not that I'm responsible for everything everywhere all at once. It's definitely not that. So I understand why you would push back against that, but that's not what he means.
Well, I look at it as a very impactful and powerful and wise set of virtues and thoughts to live your life by. I think that that's something that's definitely to be reflective with, and if implemented, would definitely lead to a very successful life, a very peaceful life, a very intentional life. So that's what I said. I agree with everything with that. I had to push back on, but I focus on others, and I see nothing but a clear guide of behaviors and attitudes and mindsets to now navigate what we just outlined for the first 45 minutes of our podcast.
Yeah.
So I like to listen to that context, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And see, that's where I think it could be an excellent segue into, you give us what suggestions you have for us going forward.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to stay with, because this is up here now, two things come to mind. So I'm going to give two suggestions which are complementary. One is get the book out of the library, or go buy the book. And again, the original version of it was 2017. It's a small book. It's like $100. There's it's just the words on the pages, and it's powerful. In 2021, he put out a second edition, which is a kind of a graphic edition, which is beautiful. So you can get the details of this there. That's one. Another way to do it is, if you go to Timothy Snyder on YouTube, there are 20 short videos. And by short, I'm saying, I don't remember exactly. I'm going to say they're between 7 and probably no longer than 15 minutes, where he speaks looking directly into the camera. He tells you what he means by each of these. So you can find this online as well, and you can do it in bits. Like, in other words, you can listen to 2 or 3 of them, or listen to one at a time. Over 20 days, you can hear all of them. So I would recommend, I have a lot of respect for Snyder's work. He's a scholar of Eastern and Central Europe in the 20th century, and he's now seeing the need for what he's learned in his scholarship right here in his country. He's from Ohio originally. So I would say those two things. On Tyranny, you can get the book anywhere, or go to YouTube, look for Timothy Snyder on Tyranny, and there are 20 short videos where he explains each one of these. So that's probably the best homework I could give today.
Well, I think that's a powerful list that you put up there. I think that I'm definitely going to look into it. Again, I think that as a person who loves frameworks, who loves systems, and looks at human behavior, someone who understands that and looks for that guidance and the growth in that, understanding in that, this is something I could definitely look at as being applicable that I can begin to use in my life as well, and then and discuss. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a powerful way to wrap up our show today, as a matter of fact. And as we wrap up our show, let's now give our flowers to people who we believe have been fully human and lived a fully human life. So I want to give you the opportunity to go first with that.
Yeah, so I'm gonna mention somebody who I've mentioned it once before, and I just listened to him interviewed, a recent interview back. It was in February, I think, one more time, and he spoke at a level of articulation of Christianity and politics that I've never heard anybody do before, and I mean across the board. And this is in no way to in any way limit what Dr. King said or what Thomas Merton said or what John Lewis said or what Jimmy Carter said. I mean, these are, all wonderful human beings. But James Tallarico, who's now the Democratic candidate for senator in Texas, he was a Texas state legislator. He's a seminarian. He was a public school teacher. He articulates I'm going to use the word now, he doesn't say this, the blasphemy of the conservative Christian movement behind Project 2025, the evangelical movement that's hurting this country and hurting people. And he just interprets the words of Christ, and this is whether somebody believes in the gospel and the epistles of Paul, et cetera, or not. But he articulates both the Hebrew scripture, what Christians call the Old Testament, the Christian scripture, which is we call the New Testament, and he's fluent in talking about the messages of taking care of the poor, the hungry, taking care of the least of us, which is what Christ's message was, and that's completely at odds with what the Christian nationalists and people like Mike Johnson and J.D. Vance and other alleged Christians say out loud and do. They all claim to be Christian in some way, shape, or form. So James Tallarico is he's getting a lot of traction in conservative Christian Texas districts because people are attracted to his nonviolent take on the words of Jesus Christ. So he's I liked him when I first heard him like 2 or 3 years ago when he was just starting to get a little bit of traction. I like him even more now. He's an imposing presence, and he's just a friendly, calm guy. He doesn't, get excited or anything. He just talks about what he knows. So James Tallarico, if I were living in Texas, I'd be voting for him.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to give my flowers to everybody who that are standing up to Trump and this administration and being brave enough to say and put their life on the lines for what they feel is not right. I feel that they need to be honored. And those that are fully human, those individuals who are willing to put themselves in harm's way, and that to me is the ultimate sacrifice. You can't help but admire. And I think those are the individuals who define what we're advocating for, who they're living at. So they've gotten uncomfortable enough. So I want to celebrate them as we wrap up the show.
Yeah, amen.
All right, so now with that being said, we conclude our show until next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's all for ways to be more fully human. Thank you.